Welcome to the session called Performance Update 2019. Now, when connecting FileMaker Pro to Server, I already mentioned that you need to be aware of the number of queries going between client and server. So I have only two charts here. One is going through sorting records when you have the records on a client, and these new charts, just to understand, are showing the minimum and maximum values, because all the tests were running in 5 iterations, so that you could see the difference. So the light blue bar shows the minimum time, and the dark blue one shows the maximum time across those 5 iterations. Typically, the maximum time is the first iteration because it needs to load the data to the local cache, and then the remaining iterations are much faster. And this is performing fine. Obviously, this is significantly affected in the case of FileMaker Cloud by the fact that I was connecting to the US. But I will show you the main results of the long time taking operations. So exporting 10,000 records. This was exporting the records to a temporary file in the temporary folder using tab delimited text. And again, light blue is the fastest instance, dark blue is the slowest instance. Interesting comparison to keep in mind is that the first 3 bars are for that 10 years or 11 years old Mac Pro. The last 2 bars are running on Amazon. One is on the FileMaker Cloud for AWS, which is the FileMaker Cloud 1. FileMaker 18 has a new feature called Startup Restoration, and it also comes with that parallel processing. It includes page level locks. You cannot enable one and disable the other one. You either enable both or disable both. So the charts, which are just FileMaker Server 18 v2, these are with startup restoration disabled, and the charts showing marked with SR are with startup restoration enabled. And what is expected and what was told us by Clarice is that startup restoration basically slows down modifications. So whenever you write data to FileMaker database with startup restoration, it's expected to be slower than without startup restoration. While working with data, retrieving the data, especially if you have multiple users, that's something that's going to be slower with FileMaker 18 and startup restoration enabled. But the total tells us when we have multiple users doing the same thing, how long it's going to take across all the users. For imports, the charts look like this. Again, 5 simultaneous sessions. This is the case where the startup restoration significantly slows down the record creation. So that's what we expected. And this is the total times. The good news, I noticed almost in all tests, is the performance of FileMaker Server 18 without startup restoration in comparison to FileMaker Server 17. So even without startup restoration and without the new page level locking, FileMaker Server 18 on the same configuration seems to be significantly faster than FileMaker Server 17, which is great news. Now this is not so great. When I was testing the 15 simultaneous users or sessions, and with the imports, I ran to times which count in hours. So that's one of the reasons I finished the FileMaker Cloud testing last night, even though I started during the night from Monday to Tuesday, because the total time that it took me to run those tests was about 40 hours. What I found quite interesting again is comparing FileMaker Cloud with the 10 years old Mac Pro. So if you have a power or processing power intensive solutions where speed matters for your clients, this is something to consider, even if they offload the task to the server. That with the cloud, you are basically working in a virtualized environment which has limited resources. You have the possibility to upgrade to get more power, and you can get even more power than you can get in a single machine because it's a cluster, but you will pay money for the higher power. So it's a consideration to take when thinking about cloud. And this is what happened when I was running the tests. Clearly FileMaker Cloud did notice that I'm asking too much from it and was offering me to upgrade, but to keep the tests accurate, I obviously didn't want to upgrade. But now let me talk a little bit about real experiences from working with real customers and some deep information under the hood. And the first experience is about cache allocation setting. One customer from Pennsylvania turned to us asking us for help with their server, their solution performance. And the most critical issue they had last year when they turned to us was that their solution, which was used by typically around 100 users concurrently, was having bad times after running for more than about a day. So it started to be so slow that the single search query that normally takes a few seconds was taking minutes. So it was absolutely unusable. And they even had the support ticket open with FileMaker trying to resolve it, but without success, so they turned to us. And what we discovered was that on a server which had 56 gigabytes of memory, they had 48 gigabytes allocated for the FileMaker server cache. And this was based on a recommendation from FileMaker support. I believe it was because of misunderstanding what the technical support actually advised them. And what they were thinking is that they dedicated 48 gigs of RAM to FileMaker. But the point was that by allocating 48 gigs of RAM for cache, they only left about 5 gigabytes for FileMaker server to take care of the client connections. And if they have 100 clients, that's only about 50 megabytes per client. That's not much. And their database, if I recall correctly, was about 40 gigabytes large. So handling 100 clients with 50 megabytes having for each client, I was not surprised that it was getting so slow. So what we recommended was decreasing the cache allocation. And in the end, we ended up with 8 gigs allocation, which became stable, and now they are happy. So the current configuration looks like this, and now they have about, by average, 450 megabytes per client for processing the client's requests. For those you don't know, since FileMaker Server 17, size of the cache allocation can no longer be set in the web-based admin console. You have to do it through the command line. Default allocation is 500 megabytes, and for small solutions it's enough. Typically the recommendation is watch the stats, specifically the cache hit, and only increase the cache if the cache hit is not 100%, or if it goes under 100% for a longer time, because typically even if you have 5 gigabytes database, if the users only access 1/10 of it, it fits in the cache. Printing company was creating reports, and so we measured also the script, and just this part was taking over almost 2 minutes in a test case. And this is the layout. So what we recommended and did for them is that we replaced those merge fields with real fields, and we created a separate script for calculating those fields as a merge in a calculation. So as a result, we cut the time down from 2 minutes to less than 4 seconds. Another thing that I faced this year was speed of SSD. If a solid-state drive has less than 25% available space, it's becoming very slow, and the speed goes down to less than 10%. Last year, for those who were in Liechtenstein, I talked about how FileMaker uses bitmaps to transfer lists of records between server and client. This is very efficient because when you have a list of 100,000 records, you actually need only 100,000 bits to tell the client which records are in the list. Each bit indicates whether the record is there. If you delete some records, those bits become zeros. But it's only going to stay this way as long as there are enough records to make this efficient. If you delete more records, now FileMaker decides it's more efficient to have 2 bitmaps, one representing the single record here with the ID 2, and the other one representing the remaining block of records. So as you delete more, you see that the records become more sparse. Now the other thing is page level locking, and I don't know how much you are aware of the file structure. I definitely recommend watching all the Under the Hood sessions presented by Clay Meckel. They are available on YouTube from FileMaker. But basically, FileMaker, when it loads the database, it stores everything in B trees. Page level locking enables one user who needs to change this block of data when another user wants to change the other block of data to work this way. So first user changes, locks the root because there will be some changes, and then it goes through the structure and only locks the pages or blocks of data that are affected by the change. While now he already knows, or FileMaker already knows, that there will be no change in the top node, so it unlocks the root for other users. So while the request of the first user is still being handled, request for another user can already start to be handled as well. So instead of doing this in sequence, the two requests can be handled almost simultaneously. That's all for now. I would like to thank you for watching this video to the end, and because I value your time you have spent watching it, let me give you 30 minutes of my time in return. Just use this link and schedule one free 30-minute consultation. I look forward to talking to you.